All right, Rand, let's head to the AFC West, specifically the desert. Going to go to Las Vegas. Check out some burning questions for the Las Vegas Raiders. New GM, new head coach, new OC, new quarterback, and a lot of new shiny objects they got in the draft, starting with Ashton Genty. Your burning question, however, it's an interesting one. How involved is Tom Brady, minority owner, going to be in the day-to-day operations? You would imagine he has a relationship with John Spytek. I believe they were both together at Michigan, the GM. He's close with Shedeur Sanders. That never materialized in terms of the quarterback situation. So what are your expectations in terms of how Tom Brady may have already been operating and how he may operate going forward behind the scenes in the front office for Las Vegas?
Well, for one, I'll start with saying I think he's just taken a position of an owner, and I don't think he's just been involved in speculated day-to-day operation and what he's involved in. I think he has taken a position of an owner, which is coach football and evaluate talent. Day operation, I don't think he's as involved as people may have think.
All right, yeah. So one of the other things to keep in mind here is this defense with Las Vegas, because the Tom Brady angle is an interesting one, and we know about Geno Smith, Ashton Genty. They drafted Jack Besh. They drafted Dante Thornton, all guys who are going to be able to get open. And don't forget Brock Bowers, arguably the best player in the NFL, at least one of the top 5 players based on this rookie season last year, 13th overall pick. But my question is, can this defense be sneaky? Average was the term I used. And by that, I mean, can they hold up long enough that if the Raiders are able to score 28 to 35 points, can they eke out a win? We know about Max Crosby, of course. That's where the conversation starts. One of the most active edge rushers in the NFL. Christian Wilkins will be back off the injury. They signed Devin White, the linebacker, who played for the Buccaneers forever. Landon Roberts comes over from New England, and by way previously of that, who's with the Steelers. He has a relationship with Tom Brady. They signed Jeremy Chin, and they got Eric Stokes, the cornerback, the former first-round pick of the Green Bay Packers. On paper, this defense should look a lot better than it did a year ago. We'll see how it plays out in reality in one of the toughest divisions in football. Patrick Graham's defensive coordinator. He's done a pretty good job there. But I think offensively, they're much fewer concerns than they were a year ago because it starts with Geno. And then defensively, you got to figure out a way to slow. You're not going to stop Tom Brady. You're not going to stop Patrick Mahomes. You're not going to stop Justin Herbert. You might not even stop Bo Nix, which is a funny thing to say 12 months out now. But if you can just win some of those third downs, get off the field, and allow Geno to get back out there, I think there's an opportunity for this team to be around 500. Rand, what do you think about that? Can this team get to 8 or 9 wins, or is that too much to ask? Are they legitimately a year away, like we were talking about with New England earlier in the show?
Having technical difficulties, so to speak. I think this team is going to be a little bit more well-positioned than people think. I believe in Pete. I know what he's capable of. I've been in this division, in the division with him in the NFC West, and saw what he's able to do with rosters that people didn't think were ready to compete. So I think coordinator, which is one of the brightest defensive minds in our game. I think these guys will be takes care of the football.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. I have secretly high hopes that this team's going to be better than we give them credit for. One of the things, I've been a Geno Smith fan for it feels like 3 or 4 years now, and I think he's going to come in and open up that offense, especially with Chip Kelly down up the plays. And I think it's going to look a lot different than what we've seen in recent years, and in a good way. I think Tom Brady's influence, whatever it may end up being, is going to be mostly positive. We'll find out together, but I think this organization, you talk about Pete Carroll, is headed in the right direction, and you got to be excited if you're a Raiders fan for the first time in what feels like a minute. All right, let's go to the Denver Broncos, a team that a year ago everyone was trying to figure out how in the Lord's name you could use a 12 overall pick on Bo Nix. Sean Payton and George Payton know more than we do. Credit to Bo Nix for playing the way he did, and Sean putting him in position to have success. Now you look at this roster, they're not a lot of holes, which is nuts. They drafted Jahdae Barron, who's going to be a starter on day one, whether it's nickel or outside, we'll see. Rand, your burning question for the Denver Broncos. What improvements does Bo Nix need to make in year 2 to help lift Denver? And my follow-up to that was, how do you avoid the sophomore slump? Similar to the question you asked earlier when we were talking about a team earlier today. So how do you put Bo Nix in the best position to have success if you're Sean Payton and not put too much on his plate?
If you go back and you look at who Sean Payton is as a coordinator and what he's done, he's aggressive with the football. And so in some aspects, you want to see Bo Nix be more. And then now, if you look at his numbers that he had, he goes 2-2 in the month of December, and he threw 6 picks during October, where he only threw 1 pick. The team went 3-1. So I just think you just still need to evolve as a passer, get more comfortable, and just continue to be aggressive in spots with the football.
Yeah, and we talked for the longest time about potentially them taking Omarion Hampton, the running back, at pick 20. They ended up going with Jahdae Barron because he fell in their lap. They came back and got R.J. Harvey out of UCF. He's going to be an immediate contributor. They signed Evan Ingram, the tight end from Jacksonville previously with the Giants, and they're talking about how Sean Payton's going to use him as a move tight end and take advantage of his athleticism. And they drafted Pat Bryant. And Pat Bryant was a pick I didn't love at the time, a third-round pick, because he's 4.61 is what he ran. I didn't thought he played particularly fast, but the Broncos have talked about how they plan on using him. They love the way he plays at the end of games and shows up and makes plays. And while he may be similar in some ways to what Cortland Sutton gives you, you can never have enough big, huge targets for your wide receiver, or for your quarterback in Bo Nix. And much the same way we talked about them getting the tall receivers for C.J. Stroud and Jaden Higgins to go along with Nico Collins. So I do understand that, to go along with Marvin Mims and the way that Devon Bailey played in his rookie season last year. Does this team have a chance to threaten the Chiefs, or are we asking a little too much?
I still think you're asking a little bit too much. This is just year. And so they still have a little bit of ways to grow. They still have more questions to answer, and the Chiefs are in their spot. So I think they have a chance to make the playoffs again, but I think there is a way to compete with the Chiefs.
All right, let's take another quick break here, and we'll wrap up the AFC West, talk Chargers and the Chiefs, and we'll talk about those two teams right after this. And you pay your internet bill? You good to go now?
Hey, man, I don't know what's going on. These new subdivisions, they haven't quite wired right.
All right, we got him back. We're back, fellas. All right, good to hear it. No bigger fear than me having to do the final 15 minutes by myself, so I'm glad that you're back I can bounce some stuff off of, because let's be honest, no one wants to hear me go on for 15 to 20 minutes about what I think is important. Let's start with Los Angeles, the Chargers specifically. And you ask, this is your burning question for the Chargers, how do the Chargers plan to use their 1-2 punch with Najee Harris and first-round pick Omarion Hampton? And it feels like what Jim Harbaugh is doing is what we thought he would do when he arrived last year in L.A., take some of the pressure off of Justin Herbert, lean on the run game. They did that last year, and now they've revamped that running back room with 2 dudes who combined weigh almost 500 pounds. So what's the plan, and how do you make life easier for Justin Herbert?
So for me, it forced me to go back and look at Jim Harbaugh's history with the 49ers from 2011 to 2014. And what he's kind of traditionally had that bell cow. Now, last year with the Chargers, they had 2 guys who go over 100 carries, right? And so you go back and you look at his history in the 49ers. Now, granted, he had a Frank Gore. And in each one of those years that he had a Frank Gore went over 200 carries in the season that kind of led the way. And then I looked at the 2014 season, and that's when they drafted Carlos Hyde in the second round. But then there's the anomaly in there because they had Colin Kaepernick. And so Colin Kaepernick in that time had a lot of carries as well. So I can see them continue to give these guys carries. And I do think by the end of the season, I think Omarion Hampton will out-carry Najee Harris, especially because Najee Harris is on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, and it feels like it's rare to see 2 big backs on an NFL roster these days, right? So now we have 2 guys. Usually have a Fire and Ice or a Knuckles and what'd you call him? Sonic. I always get those 2 guys confused. And to have 2 big backs, it makes it quite clear what the plan is going to be. They also have Hassan Haskins, formerly out of Michigan. I don't know what sort of role he'll have. And the other thing I want to point to is they signed Mekhi Becton. So, again, reinforcing the idea that they're going to run the ball. They're going to be tough running the ball. The only real burner they have is Ladd McConkey on the outside. They do have Quentin Johnson, who hasn't quite yet reached his potential. So it feels like, I don't want to call it a possession offense, but it feels like an offense that's predicated on running the ball and then maybe opening things up with play action to create possibilities and opportunities for wide receivers to get open. Does that sound like I'm oversimplifying it? Does that seem like a blueprint they might be trying to work with?
No, I think it's exactly what you said. It's bully ball. You go out and you sign Mekhi Becton to go along with this already massive offensive line, and you allow those offensive linemen, those 5 guys to come off the bus first, and then you have 2, like you said, 230-plus pound running backs coming behind that. They're going to play bully ball. They're going to play possession ball because we know that Kansas City can score quick, right? So we understand that. We know Denver's building an offense that can score quick. And I'm sure the Raiders are going to want to be in that same vein. And the best way for the Chargers to combat that is by slowing the game down, possessing the ball, and being able to score when they get those opportunities. So I think this is what a Jim Harbaugh team is. This is what he built in Michigan to help combat those Ohio State offenses that can score up and down the field. Just slow the game down, play bully ball, and lean on those guys until the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that with the Bills in the last segment, what they were trying to do in terms of following the blueprint of the Eagles and pressuring Patrick Mahomes and get that opportunity. Chiefs are going to see the Chargers will see the Chiefs twice in Patrick Mahomes. And they're getting after it on the defensive line as well. They drafted Jamari Caldwell, the little spark plug from Oregon, and they drafted Kyle Kennard, the edge rusher out of South Carolina, to go along with Tuli Pilotu, who they drafted a few years ago in the second round. Khalil Mack is still there, and as a situational pass rusher probably at this point. But I think the point is that you can get after it. And if you can pressure Patrick Mahomes, that's going to make your life easier. One last thing on the burning question for the Chargers. This was mine. We talked about Trevor Lawrence on Tuesday. This is put up or shut up time in terms of where he is in his journey as a franchise quarterback. Feels like where they were Justin Herbert as well. Is that fair to say?
No, absolutely. I think it is. And when you think about it, and as we were talking about these running backs and what they're doing and what we expect their plan to be, it makes you think, why won't they just turn over the keys to Justin Herbert? What's giving them pause? And we know he's talented and possibly from a physical standpoint, one of the top 5 most talented guys at the position. But what's giving them pause and not turning over the keys to him? And so you have to wonder that. But I do agree. I think that it's time for him to take the next step, and let's see if he's really a franchise quarterback like most think he is.
Yeah, it's funny. It felt like they gave him the keys too early when Brandon Staley was there, and then they tried to dial it back maybe a little too much in the first few years of Jim Harbaugh. Maybe they'll find that happy medium. I remember when Phillip Rivers, I'm dating myself here, when Phillip Rivers was drafted, he sat on the bench for a couple years, and then Marty Schottenheimer just ran the ball the entire first 2 years, it felt like, of Phillip Rivers' career, and then things started to open up. And maybe we'll have to find that balance because, to your point, physically, good luck finding someone who can do the things that Justin Herbert can do with that size, with that sort of mobility. One of the guys who can do those things isn't quite as tall, but he's certainly as mobile and does everything else is Patrick Mahomes. So let's head our way to Kansas City here for the final team we'll talk about in terms of burning questions for the AFC West. And my burning question is, if you're every other team in the AFC and you see what the Chiefs have done to get better, how do you get better by that much and then some to have a chance to compete for the conference? And we've sort of talked about that with the Chargers, and we talked about that with the Bills. But every team's looking at the Chiefs thinking, okay, what do we have to do to get better? And some teams have a lot to do, and some teams have a little bit to do. So let's talk about the Raiders, for example, because we know that the Bills are close and the Chargers are relatively close and the Ravens are close. But if you're a team like the Broncos or the Raiders in this division, what's the first thing you need to do to get better? Is that stock the front four, or is there something else you're thinking about?
No, you have to build your team with the thought in mind of the people that you're going to play the most, which is within your division. So how are you going to compete within your division? And this is a copycat league. Once teams can see how to beat a specific team, then they're going to start to build that and incorporate that into their system. And so if you're the Raiders, you have to be able to put a front together that's going to be able to get to Patrick Mahomes and get him on the ground and affect that offense.
All right, we'll find out together. Rand, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't have your burning question for the Chiefs. I forgot to write it down. What is your burning question for Kansas City?
So my burning question was is this the final year of this championship window for the Chiefs?
Oh, that's why I didn't write it down because it sounded so crazy. Okay, go ahead.
And it's hard to say this against an Andy Reid led team, right? Because he's found at different times how to reimagine this offense and do different things to, just again, reimagine the offense. Everyone thought they wouldn't do anything without Tyreek Hill, and then here they are again. However, I will jump in the minority and say I think this window for the Chiefs is closing. Because you have some key components on this team. You shake your head, Ryan. I see you shaking your head. But you have Chris Jones that's getting older and still nursing a knee injury. Then you have Travis Kelce entering the final year of his deal, and he is making more money off the field than he is on the field at this point. And so I think that window's closing. Now, again, you look at them reimagining their offense, and you go and you still have Rashee Rice, you have Xavier Worthy, you sign Hollywood Brown. So you have these explosive weapons. But I do think that window for the Chiefs is closing.
All right, before I ask this question, I'll follow up with this one. Which team is most likely to replace the Chiefs in the AFC?
I'd say right now, if I could take two, I would say the way Baltimore is currently built, if they could cash in on this window, because I think their window is probably smaller than the Chiefs, but Baltimore is built to take over as well as Kansas City. I'm not Kansas City, excuse me, Buffalo.
Hey, let me ask you this question now that you're speaking on it. It feels like both the Ravens and the Bills, they can beat the Chiefs in the regular season. Does something happen, like going to Arrowhead Stadium in January when it's 15 degrees? Does something happen in terms of the way you play? Do you get tight? Do you do the things you didn't do in November, for example, when you were able to win and sometimes make it look relatively easy?
Yeah, and the thing that changes most is, like you said, if it's Buffalo or if it's Baltimore, they play in the same conditions in terms of weather. They're both outdoor teams, and they have cold, frigid weather, so the weather shouldn't be a factor. However, the circumstance changes. In January, it's one and done. Right, there's no next week if you lose, and you're playing these teams in the regular season. You lose, you have an opportunity to fix it, and you have another opponent the following week. And then you mix in just overall playoff experience. Like Patrick Mahomes has seen it, he's done it. I go back to our year in San Francisco, where the year we played them in the Super Bowl, they overcame large deficits from, I think it was Houston. They were down 24, came back and won that game. And then us in San Francisco in the Super Bowl, we were up 10 with 7 minutes to go. And I think we ended up losing by double-digit points. And so he's seen all these circumstances and scenarios that these other quarterbacks hadn't faced.
Yeah, and it feels like Tom Brady down the stretch, when Tom Brady was in his prime getting red hot, there was no lead that was big enough. I mean, again, unfortunately, Kyle Shanahan was OC in Atlanta in that Super Bowl that people still talk about. I'll tell you a story about the San Francisco KC Super Bowl, which was in Miami. This is how much they love me at work. They sent me into the San Francisco locker room to ask questions after the game about what went wrong in that coverage when Tyreek had that catch in that big over. I don't even remember if it was like a third and long or fourth down or whatever it was. Not surprisingly, people didn't want to talk about it, but they sent me down there to see if I could take a beating. I survived. I got out of there, asked my question. Not a lot of happy faces in that locker room, but I think that aura of Patrick Mahomes, whether you want to admit it or not, looms over Arrowhead Stadium in January football. And you want to be the guy that gets on the I'm off the Kansas City train early. I will let you sit first class in that train because I ain't getting on. I ain't getting on just yet. I've seen that movie too many times.